Hello and a warm welcome. It's more than 24 hours now that the Indian Armed Forces launched precision strikes on terrorist infrastructure at 9 sites in Pakistan and Pakistan occupied Kashmir in retaliation for the Pahalgam terror attack. And what has happened since then? Press conferences, Cabinet Committee on Security, followed by a cabinet meeting. And then by the evening, we also heard stories about how there was firing at the LOC, especially in the Poonch sector, where few casualties have taken place. There is a lot of misinformation as well on both sides of the border, whether it is Pakistan or whether it is India. So the big question is, have we managed to package this entire operation into a victory model? What are the challenges ahead? Does it look like a diplomatic failure? All these are questions which we are going to raise at this point of time. Joining me now is counterterrorism expert Ajay Sahni. And it's more than 24 hours, in fact, more than 35 hours, if I may say it correctly, that this Operation Sindoor took place. Of course, the armed forces did their best, but what are the challenges now in the midst of so much of information, misinformation campaign on both sides? Can we really call it a big victory? And we are seeing visuals of celebrations happening all across. To unmute, sir. You're muted. Yes.
What I was saying was it's a complex scenario at this juncture. The one thing we must understand, recognize in terms of success is that 9 targets were very precisely located, and the missiles and the damage done is now no longer contested. It has been accepted and visually demonstrated on both sides. So that is a precision success that is of great importance. On the other hand, we are now seeing increasing evidence that we have also suffered significant losses. Uh, Between 3 and 5 planes, Indian planes, appear to have been downed. We still have to wait till all this sort of clears up from the fog of war. There's a lot of nonsense ongoing. As you said, one of the things is the media campaigns on both sides, and both sides are trying to basically, as you mentioned, shape a victory narrative, because it is a victory narrative which will allow both sides to sort of walk back in terms of the aggression, the noise that we have seen over the past 2 weeks or more now. So, unless we have a situation where both the sides are able to convincingly project a victory narrative to the domestic audiences, which is not difficult, which can be done even with the balance of harm that has currently been inflicted, with the claims that Pakistan makes of having brought down 5 of India's planes, with the demonstration of the fact that we have actually hit 9 targets very precisely, uh, the intended targets, not some random locations. I think the victory narrative could already be shaped. Unfortunately, we are seeing too many conflicted narratives, voices, directions being taken by the particularly on social media. So this victory narrative, as such, is not crystallizing on either side of the border. I think there has also been a unfortunate silence uh, on the part of the Indian government. There's a lot of speech outside the government, but the Indian government has sought to project, no doubt, a very authoritative, very calm sort of assessment of what has been done through the press conference that was given with the Foreign Secretary and the Armed Forces representatives speaking. But they have failed to address this contesting narrative. They have failed to address the question as to whether there were losses on our side and what those losses mean and imply for the state of India. I think this is the failure that is costing us. It's an operation. There will be losses possibly losses on both sides. No conflict of this nature uh, ever goes unanswered.
No,
We
but
can't
Ali,
over.
is it politics which stops this honest admission of the losses? Is this politics which stops the government, or maybe stops the army also to share a lot of things, maybe from the security point of view, or I don't know, it may be couched as a national security issue. But is it the politics that comes in the way when you cannot honestly admit that, look, there were losses, our operation has succeeded, but we did suffer losses?
Look, we have to understand that if we put politics over everything else, we will not be able to address the national security issues. It is politics that created the groundswell of demand for military operations, on the basis of which this government justified these operations. Now these operations have occurred. Many questions are there. There is a furor among the people. There are forces that are seeking to undercut the Indian position. You may directly or indirectly do so. You do not, nothing requires the exposure of national security secrets. But you have to address these doubts that are being created, that are sought to be created. You have to. Otherwise, you cannot. This is, it's a war of propaganda on both sides. If you want to win the war of propaganda, then you have to answer the questions that are being raised by the adversary, or marginalize those questions, or discount or discredit those questions. We are not seeing that being done in any authoritative manner.
How so far, how would you really define this Operation Sindoor? It's been successful, it's been the success has been projected so far, but in your eyes, from your lens, how would you view this entire operation? Does it look like just like a propaganda war where losses have been on both sides, but an honest admission is missing somewhere?
No, look, first of all, as far as the operation itself is concerned, I believe it was a misconceived operation. It is misconceived because it is based on the idea that we can go across, bomb a few locations, terrorist locations, and this will act as a future deterrent. In fact, it is going to be the very opposite. You have not only demonstrated your strength, you have also exposed your vulnerabilities. So that deterrence will be undermined. The second and crucial factor that we seem to have completely forgotten in planning and imagining this operation, well before the operation goes into play, is that the United States carried out thousands of drone strikes, not for one, not two, not five, not nine, thousands of drone strikes on Pakistani soil. And Pakistan never stopped its support to the Taliban against the Western coalition led by the US in Afghanistan till they had returned the Taliban to power and forced the United States and the Western powers to flee Afghanistan. No other word for it, to flee Afghanistan. So to believe that a bombing of 9 targets or 90 targets is going to abruptly transform Pakistan into a quivering mess, which will give up a campaign of terrorism that they have sustained for decades now, 3.5 decades in Kashmir, a decade and a half before that in Punjab, 78 years of unrelenting hostility to India. The very idea that you can, dissipate this through any one operation or incident or strike, or
So what you're saying, Mr. Sani, so what have we achieved at the end of the day, except for some breast beating, except for some jingoism and patriotism that, look, we've carried out a big operation, we put out some perfect optics, we put out some perfect media management. But apart from that, what? What have we achieved at the
nothing,
end of operations?
nothing, 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 not because of what happened in this operation or in the retaliation to this operation, but in the very conceptualization of this operation. We have spoken of this before, and I had said this already, that nothing can be achieved by a single strike, even if it is deep into Pakistan, even if it is multiple targets. Nothing is going to be achieved. and nothing has been achieved except for domestic political projections. And that has also become extremely muddied because neither side can really say that it's come out covered in glory. The Pakistanis cannot deny, even if they have taken down 2, 3, 5 of our planes, cannot deny that the entire defense systems failed, that every single target that was intended to be hit was in fact hit. So that's a terrible, terrible weakness, vulnerability, demonstration of vulnerability on their
But
part. On the
but
other hand, we have lost possibly whatever number of planes. We will have to wait till the actual official admission comes.
you're right
And
that
that
there
has
is no.
exposed our vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. No, you're right that no official confirmation as of now has not come yet as to how many planes on the Indian sides have been downed. But I'm just worried as a nation, the kind of frenzy, the kind of euphoria, or this the kind of sentiments which were generated through this. And I'm not blaming anyone, because the kind of massacre which happened on 22nd April, that was dastardly, that was heinous, to say the least. But at the end of the day, what are we breast beating about? That there was an operation called Operation Sindoor, which is successful, and and can we sit satisfied at the end of the day, thinking that now we can sleep at peace? There will be no other Pahalgam, or there won't be another Pahalgam.
There will be other Pahalgams. And this whole nonsense about the people having these expectations and this heinous and dastardly operation that we talk about, as if heinous and dastardly violence by terrorists is something new in Jammu Kashmir. We have spoken of this before. Thousands and thousands of people, thousands of Hindus were being killed every year. Not Hindus alone. Thousands of people in Jammu Kashmir were being killed every year. The entire movement of jihad backed by Pakistan started with the targeted killings of Hindus. An exodus of almost the entire population of Hindu Pandits took place. This is not the first offense. Consequently, what we should be talking about is not people's passions. People's passions were not aroused by the incident. People's passions were aroused by an orchestrated campaign to inflame those anger, to inflame anger. So it's not the people who are defining what is being done over here. Why were people not unsettled by hundreds of thousands of Kashmiri Pandits being forced by murder, by torture, by rape, by intimidation to flee the valley? Why were Hindu passions not aroused then? And why are Hindu passions aroused with 26 killed in this case? Because they are being inflamed intentionally. Now, having said that, what we are saying is this was a political decision from beginning to end. This is not something that is happening because of the groundswell from below. It is something that is being imposed from the leadership and on top.
So, would you call it a political victory? Would you call it a victory of the armed forces? Would you call it a diplomatic victory? How does one see that then?
As yet, well, if you're asking me, I don't see it as victory at all, because you have to have a certain standard or certain parameters that define victory. Victory will be achieved if deterrence is achieved. Otherwise, it's not. It's nothing. If you are simply trying to chalk up points, well, yes, we hit 9 of their intended targets. Every single target that they were mandated to hit was hit. That was the army's. That was the Air Force and the Army's job. They've done their job. But in the process, we have lost a number of possibly lost a number of planes, a drone. So the other side can also claim a certain victory. So an ambiguity has come into the entire narrative. And that is what is, I think, very deeply problematic in this whole incident. But most importantly, I come back to this again and again, that the objective was deterrence. Unless these incidents have imposed deterrence on Pakistan, we don't have a victory. In fact, we may package a victory, we may orchestrate a narrative because we control the media, because we control the social media, or at least dominant sections of the social media. We may be able to, create a narrative of victory. And that I see as the only real objective of the political leadership here. Not actually to secure that clear objective that they claim, deterrence. If
Right.
deterrence is the objective, then I'm afraid we haven't got any gain, forget victory.
No, but as you said rightly, that there is so much of ambiguity now. And in the middle of all this ambiguity, uh, what should the government, what should the media be doing? And when I'm asking you this question, I'm asking you a question on the responsible behavior. Because now, given the kind of passions which have already been inflamed, there is a chance, and I came across this a poster which, where Rajnath Singh, Amit Shah, and Prime Minister Modi seem to be taking the credit of Operation Sindoor. Now, that credit taking exercise has begun. Of course, all the credit goes to the armed forces for the kind of meticulous missile shooting and whatever they did on the ground. But this, amidst this ambiguity, if this credit taking exercise begins, then the mainstream media channels, they start showing that, look, this is how the missiles were launched. These are the points which were completely destroyed. So, what does one do at this point of time? From your lens, from your perspective, how do you think, how should be the behavior of the media and the government now that the operation has been conducted? We know that the operation is still on because the firing is still on. Pakistan has not relented. So what should we be doing as a nation? Should we be celebrating?
So the first thing you must understand that taking credit was the principal purpose of this operation. There was no other purpose. That was the principal purpose. All the other possible goals were simply secondary to this primary purpose. What should we do? I don't think we are relevant. You said, a rational voice. What should the people who are, trying to take an objective view of all this? The objective view is not relevant. The objective view, and in fact, not as a breast beating over here. As a matter of fact, what is now required is for the narrative to be established, the narrative that is thought by both sides. That's what will bring peace. If Pakistan can convince its side, its populations, that they have had a great victory, and India is able to convince the Indian population, or at least the majority of those who matter as a political constituency, as long as these two constituencies can be convinced each that they have had a victory. And the interesting thing over here is that between conflicting parties, both parties in this case can have a victory in their own spheres.
But
Each of them
but
can
why?
go to their own.
No, but from what you're saying, that both sides will have to build a narrative, convince their domestic audience that, look, we have won the war or won whatever operation was there. But in the middle of that, how do both sides ensure that there is no escalation? You cannot have the building of narrative and the firing going on at the borders all together.
No, no,
Somewhere
it
there
has
has to
to.
be some kind
It
of
has
unification.
to, because you will end this operation when you have secured the objectives of the narrative. You have to carry on with this because the conflict or the confrontation or the operation at this juncture has proven to be ambiguous, not allowing either side to proclaim clear victory. This friction will have to continue. There is no great escalation. Please understand, people are talking about loss of life on the LOC and IB as a result of exchange of fire. These exchanges of fire have happened for decades at end. Civilians have been killed. It's a terrible thing. Civilians have been killed for decades at end in these exchanges of fire on both sides. And that is why, when in the few very rational moments that we have between India and Pakistan, a ceasefire was agreed upon. First in 2004, breached after 2008, re-established after 2021. So these are moments of very rare rationality between the two countries. Right now, because of this operation and because of Pakistan's now, uh, uh, they are saying our people expect a military response, just as we were saying that our people expect a military response. They will have to now produce something. This is, you see, this does reflect a certain kind of an escalation, no doubt, because it's not ending. One incident is leading to another. But we are not seeing an escalation in terms of type of actions. These are old patterns of friction between India and Pakistan. The exchange of fire along the IB and LOC is an old pattern of friction between India and Pakistan. It is not going to result in a open warfare or a nuclear escalation.
But now, what is the biggest challenge now? And would you call this a diplomatic failure also? But if you look at the way the various nations of the world have reacted, uh, very few nations have come out with an outright support for India or for Pakistan. Most of them have come out with a balanced statement saying that both sides should maintain some kind of a balance. So does it go to show that there has been a diplomatic failure somewhere for the kind of narrative we build that we are a Vishwaguru, Modi ji traveling to all the countries and breastbeating about the foreign policy, and not one but many people have done that. So does it look like a diplomatic failure also to you?
I have very long been a skeptic as far as India's Vishwaguru status and all these diplomatic successes of the past few years go. I don't think India has gained many friends across the world. If anything, if you see the actual behavior of nations towards India, we are not in a very good space. If you see a range of international indices which reflect perception of India, I don't think there is any dramatic gain other than a conviction that we are a very large population and we are a growing economy, and therefore we need to be taken along. But in terms of the acceptability of India, the popularity of the country among other countries, to put it down to a simple index, the popularity of the Indian passport, I don't think, if anything, there has been a loss. Secondly, very importantly, I have never taken diplomacy very seriously. I don't think it's relevant in conflicts. Uh, yes, it has a peripheral relevance in certain situations, but diplomacy only puts into words what prevails in hard equations of power on the ground. The reality is, no one can be bothered with either India or Pakistan because neither of us plays the role that we would like to play in the comity of nations. We are not a great power. We are an aspiring great power, but we are not even an emerging great power. Everyone, even Pakistan, is an aspiring great power. They may be bankrupt, but they still think that, you know, their general tells us that they are a superior culture and a superior ideology. So everyone thinks very well of themselves. But the reality is, others do not think particularly well of us. More importantly, we have to win this ourselves. Apart from Russia, I do not see in our historical record any other country ever standing for us or standing by us when it really mattered.
Yes.
And I don't see that happening now either.
And when you're saying that, except for Russia, probably no other nation has stood by India, so which means that it wouldn't be wrong to say that there has been some kind of a failure. You call it diplomatic, you call it a strategic failure, but there has been some kind of a failure in the way we've reached out to the nations in times like
Not
these.
really. Not really, because I don't think there is any way we can reach out to these other nations to get material and effective support from them. We're not important enough. Look, please understand, there is this idea that we need to create a moral support base. Geopolitics is not played out on morality. It is naked power. People come and join you when your power is greater, or ally with you when your power is great. If your power is not seen as being central to their geopolitical interests, they can't be bothered. And that really is the issue right now. We may be a large market, everybody is going to export to us. How does that make us a power? Yes, we have a large buying, but we have to buy. It's not that we are going out and buying luxury goods that we can choose to withhold. We are buying the weapon systems we need. We'll buy them from France, or we'll buy them from the US, or we'll buy them from the UK, or the available 5 or 6 major suppliers. We can't buy them from China because we have a problem with China. But eventually we have to buy everything that we are getting, importing. In fact, such a large proportion of our civilian imports comes from China, a country that we declare as an enemy, more or less our most important adversary. And we are still importing vast quantities of goods from them. So, what does that tell you? We do not have the power of choice. If we don't have the power of choice, we don't have power.
Absolutely.
If we don't
Well,
have power, nobody is
right.
going to come and stand behind you and say, oh, we are your friends and we will stand by you. You stand by the powerful, or at least you stand by those who can effectively contribute to your power. So Western nations do not. There may be this whole talk about creating India as a foil for China, and that's number one. It's delusional, and number two, if we fall into that trap, we are going to end up like Ukraine in a real conflict. We are
Right.
going to be the ones who are crushed and killed.
One last question, Mr. Sani, that in times like these, when there's so much of jingoism, so much of patriotism, and that sentiment where you cannot speak against this operation, and we are raising some very basic and fundamental facts here, and you pointed that out so clearly. But the moment you speak about these things, you are labeled as someone who is against the national interest. Now, I want to understand from you, how do you define national interest? In the middle of an operation, when there is so much of ambiguity, we are trying to raise some fundamental questions as to what has gone wrong. Why is there so much of ambiguity? If we also raise questions about the fact that some 4 or 5 planes have been downed, then, and if somebody even by mistake has tweeted, those people are forced to withdraw those tweets. In this kind of a scenario, what is really a national interest according to you? How do we put ourselves, how do we put our views as a digital platform, as a channel, as a journalist? There is a problem. There is a sense of that, what if I'm labeled as someone who is not against, who is against the country at this point of time? So what is national
The,
interest at this?
at any point of time, the national interest is the truth. We talk about this whole nonsense of the post-truth era. There is no post-truth era, because the truth will come and kick you in the face when you are least expecting it. If you
Absolutely.
build your entire narrative on falsehoods, you will find that eventually the truth will hit you when you are least prepared to face that truth. Now, how does this translate into our current situation? I'm afraid people need to contest the falsehoods that are being put out constantly, quietly, without the kind of abuse and the kind of extreme narratives that we are seeing in most of the discussions, particularly on the electronics and social media. And the people who are fueling these extreme and polarized discussions need to start understanding that they are harming India. They are not they may think they are supporting the Indian idea, or supporting India, or making India stronger in unity. Unity in falsehood is only going to expose your vulnerabilities at a far greater level in future. We need unity in truth. I mean, it amazes me. Here is a country whose motto is Satyamev Jayate. I think we should, if the kind of narratives that we are seeing today are going to continue, we should change that motto to Asatyamev Jayate. That falsehood will always triumph. Is that what we believe? As a nation, as a culture, is that what we think is the case? So this is something that has to be understood by those who believe themselves. And there are a lot of people, and we see so many ex-army, very senior people, ex police, who are just fueling this whatever narrative they are given from this so-called nationalistic or patriotic lobby. They need to understand the harm they are doing, not only to their own reputations, but to the core interests of India.
Absolutely. I think on that note, it leaves for everyone to introspect a lot as to what is happening and what is national interest is the truth, which what Mr. Sani has pointed out. And on that note, I'll end this interview. Thank you so much, Mr. Sani. It was really brilliant to speak to you and understand what you have really to say on this subject. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.